Welcome to the Stokecast, where each week we bring you an inspiring athlete, adventurer, or entrepreneur and dig into their stories and strategies for balancing work, life, and adventure while having fun and making a difference. I'm Jonathan Ronzio.
And I'm Emily Holland. Thanks for joining us today.
Let's get to it. What's up and welcome to episode 9 of the Stokecast. Today we are talking to ultra trail runner Joe McConaughy, and man, this guy is crazy.
He's cool.
He's cool, but he's freaking crazy.
Yeah, so Joe, just some quick stats on him because he gets into the details obviously of his life, but so he had the fastest known time for the PCT.
Yep.
Then he's like, I'm probably not going to do a trail again. JK, I'm actually going to go for the fastest known time on the AT, the Appalachian Trail, and crush that, too.
Self-supported.
Self-supported, that's key.
Self-supported on the AT, he beat the supported record.
Right.
By 10 hours.
If you don't know through hiking, it probably means nothing to you, but it's very impressive. Like, very, very impressive.
Yeah, and if you don't know the PCT and AT, these are the 2,000-mile plus walks on either coast of America.
Yeah. They're insane. So Joe was actually a friend of mine, and I was super psyched to have him on because honestly, some of the stuff they talked about, I didn't know about him. We haven't gone that in depth about the last 10 miles of his Appalachian Trail and how he was feeling and the reward at the end and all that good stuff. So it was kind of interesting. So out of this episode with Joe, who's a great storyteller, I really felt like I was along for the journey. So out of this, you will either be inspired to go and take on one of these great walks or runs, whatever you choose, or run your first ultra, or you'll decide that you will never, ever, ever go attempt running anything like this, based on hearing some of the stories from Joe. But I think even the bad stories, he has such a positive attitude about that I'm actually, even though things went horribly wrong there, maybe I would still. Yeah. I would. He's looking back laughing. Yeah. So he's a great guy. We loved our conversation with him. And he has some good nuggets about basically how to feel thankful for the people in his life, even though he's doing these really individual pursuits. Yeah, how to I mean, it's a sport so often, whether it's trail running or mountaineering or climbing, or there are things that we do in this industry that are so individualistic and so often selfish, and so his perspective on it was refreshing. Yeah. Enjoy. All right, so we have ultra trail runner Joe McConaughy on with us today. Hey, Joe, what's up?
Hey, Emily, how are you doing?
Doing good. I'm here, obviously, with Jonathan. Say hi to Jonathan, too.
That's Jonathan. Usually I don't get interviewed by people I know, so this will be fun.
Yeah, so, Joe, maybe you want to just start? How do we know each other?
I'm starting. I was living in Austria, looking for jobs back in Boston, where I went to school. And I happened to come in contact with a lovely lady named Emily, who, long story short, helped me get a job working essentially at a summer camp for middle schoolers, international middle schoolers back in Boston. And so essentially the reason I have my job is because of you, Emily.
Oh, wow. Oh, I definitely didn't lead up to that on purpose.
No.
She's not,
I'm not fishing
she's totally
at all. No, but we want to obviously start with your story. So how did you get into running in the first place? How did you come to live in the Northeast? I think you grew up right in the Pacific Northwest, right?
Yep, I grew up just north of Seattle. I guess I got into running. I was always like that. I'm sure there's so many of these kids out there, but I was that kid who did 8 sports, was on multiple different teams for a sport, was always I was going to make it into the NBA before the Seattle Supersonics ever got bought out by Oklahoma. So that's a bummer. And then I guess that kind of got me into running. So I started running semi-competitively in 5th grade for a club team. My very first race, I ate about 4 bowls of Trick cereal because I didn't want my brother getting the last 2 bowls that were left. Vomited a rainbow. And that eventually, it was pretty nasty. My dad gave me this horrified look, and then I kept coming back, I guess.
No, that was before they changed the shape into all balls, right? That's what's when there were actual shapes of.
Oh my God, they're fruit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, they changed that?
Yeah, tricks are just balls now.
Wow,
they switched it up.
Ruined my childhood.
I know, right?
Sorry,
so it was a good experience for you, I'm sure.
Oh,
eating original tricks.
Because from like they sent me to junior nationals, and mind you, like anybody in 5th grade who's running, the qualifications to make the team are have a pulse. And so I joined the team. I was okay. My team made it to junior nationals, so therefore I made it to junior nationals. And then I switched school districts in 5th grade, going into 6th grade. So I was always known as the kid who went to junior nationals. So I kind of had this like running identity super early on, which I think is kind of cool looking back on it, because it's always been a part of my middle school, high school, college, even now it's a big part of my life.
Yeah, that is cool. That had to be super formative for your identity. Like if people knew of you for that, like you probably started to pursue more of that because of it.
Yeah, and as an 8th grader walking around thinking to yourself like, oh, I'm better than these guys, I can run a sub 5-minute mile, and then realizing that literally 0 other people at the school care about anybody running a mile.
Yeah.
In middle school gives you you come into life with an altered shape of reality.
So Emily just turned and smirked at me, because literally before this podcast, like we've been recording all day, different interviews, and I had to like get out and go for a quick run. So I went and just sprinted a mile, and I got my first sub 5. And
I knew he wanted to talk about it.
So as soon as you said that, Emily looked at me with like the biggest smirk, and yes, I had to bring that up. I'm proud of it.
We're both so humble.
Bacon Burrier. Part of your life.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm as good as you at an 8th grade level.
Sorry, man. That wasn't intentional.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's I love it. Let's keep going. Let's go beyond junior high.
And then I went, ran in high school. I was good enough to make it in the collegiate level and wanted to run, which I guess, considering you do kind of a, like, I guess your guys' vision isn't just the sport you pursue, but, kind of the holistic picture of your lifestyle, I guess. I knew I wanted to get out of Seattle and do something different, live somewhere different, experience something different. And so I kind of ended up picking Boston and running at Boston College, which was a, totally different experience living on the East Coast, running, for a D1 school, a little bit more pressure, to say the least, but it was a super good change for me. I think, getting outside of your comfort zone, that's kind of like one of the things I think that I guess is always, I don't know, for whatever reason, but I've always looked to get out of my comfort zone, whether that's running the PCT or the AT or choosing where I want to live or go to school or what I want to do for work. All those things, I guess, is kind of another common thread.
Where do you think you get that from? Is that just inherent in you, or how do you think you've cultivated that, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone?
I don't know. I think part of it's luck and having 2 really awesome parents, and my stepmom is also equally awesome. But they both grew up, and then like my mom moved to, and this was I don't want to date my mom, but this is a while ago. My mom moved to Portland I know, right? My mom moved to Portland from Houston, Texas to go to Reed College, like an ultra liberal, totally different experience than anything she'd seen in Houston.
Yeah.
At the age of 18, and just decided, whatever. I'm like, my parents aren't going to be here, none of my family's here, but I know this will be good for me and it'll be a good change in my pace. And my dad had a similar thing where he went to grad school at Berkeley, after growing up in California, and spent some time, backpacking in Europe. So I think I was lucky to have 2 parents that had that vision for themselves and grew up that way, which I don't think a lot of people get. Although I think it's really formative to have that kind of background and inspiration to kind of push yourself outside of your comfort zone and get outside of what you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you went to college, were you, what is it? It's track, cross country, indoor track? Like, what are the 3? So were you doing all of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, year round.
Cool. So how did you, cross country, it seems like leads pretty nicely into trail running and maybe ultra marathon trail running. But so how did you start really cultivating those skills?
Like, were you always drawn to really the outdoors? Because running on a track is entirely different.
Yeah. It hurts
totally
my
different.
knees.
Yeah, I was always drawn to the outdoors for sure. I was an Eagle Scout. And then going to school in Boston, I don't think I did one like backpacking hiking adventure in Boston, like when I was at school, other than the summers. So after graduating, I was like, man, that's like a part of myself that I didn't really invest it all in or focus it all in. And I jumped straight into the PCT actually. So I actually was a middle distance runner. I did okay in cross country. I was always anemic. So I'd like managed to bonk in a 6 mile race or 5 mile race, which is pretty amazing. And I do well in the mile 1500s, racing against the ACC. And then I decided my junior year summer that I was going to go do the PCT for kicks, raise money for, or I guess in memory of my cousin Colin, who'd passed away from a childhood pediatric cancer. And the rest is history. I graduated. I was on my 60 miles a week training regimen. I gave myself a month to recover from graduating college and senior weeks and, all those celebrations that go along with that. And then had a good month of training before jumping off to try to run about 50 miles a day from Mexico to Canada.
So in 1 month, you were doing 60-mile weeks and then just decided to go do 50-mile days.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, he makes it sound so casual, like, oh, we're just going to breeze by this thing. I decided to do the PCT just randomly for fun. And then I also raised money in honor of my cousin. And then also, I broke the record. Isn't that cool? Like, what? Come on, right. Joe. Like,
So let's talk a little about that. I know it's a few years past now, but if you want to fill us in on what the the details of the run for Colin, and also for listeners, the PCT or the Pacific Crest Trail is, as he mentioned, from it goes all up the Pacific side of the United States, and it's 2,660 miles, right? That you did in 53 days.
Nice. Exactly. You got your facts right.
Just insane, man. So let's chat. How'd that go? Give us the ups and the downs real quick.
It was crazy. It coming in with no ultra running experience. It's like a blessing that I made it through. But I had it, I guess, to set myself up for a little bit of success. It wasn't like I just woke up one day and decided to do it. I had been dreaming and planning and organizing and doing all these things for about a year to try to lead up to this, although there's only so much I could do with my college training. The first, and I also had an top-notch support crew, which makes something like that so much better of an experience, but then also more manageable. I had two friends from college and then a good mutual friend of theirs who they trusted. You hear a lot of stories about people who have support crews do runs like this, and they just burn bridges and friendships, and people never talk to each other again, and somebody leaves halfway through. For us, it was like four best friends going on the coolest road trip of our life. First 10 days,
I just got chills. That sounds awesome.
It's super cool. If you can ever be a part of a support crew, it's like the most thankless. Is that the right word? Least thankful. Anyway,
you
don't get any credit for it, but you have a blast doing it, even though it's really your lifeblood. So the first 10 days, I had really awful tendonitis in my Achilles that made it pretty hard to run, and then that eventually cleared up. I had a few logistical mishaps where I had to, camp out. Having a support crew, I didn't carry a pack or a tent or a sleeping bag. So there were one or two nights that I had to kind of make my own accommodations for the night, I guess you could say, with brush and out in the woods. And then I got injured every once in a while, but, having an awesome crew, I just kept plugging away. Especially towards the middle, I started doing, 42 miles, 44 miles, 50 miles, 55 miles, 60 miles. I just kind of got stronger and stronger until about 2/3 of the way through, and then had one last good push through the state of Washington, and ended up breaking the record by, I think by 9 days, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
8 days? Yeah, something along that line. No, maybe it was a week. I might be giving myself too much credit.
No, I think you're talking about the AT.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
No, so I ended up breaking the supported record by a pretty large margin, which, I don't know, it was amazing. I can't underscore that enough.
Yeah, so it is totally amazing, and for those who are not really familiar with the PCT, give it an idea maybe of the type of terrain you're going over for the PCT, like the varied terrain and maybe elevation gain.
So PCT I want to say it's like around 400,000 feet of elevation gain, if I remember correctly.
Cool. So not that much.
So just a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know how many Eiffel Towers that is, but I'm sure it's a lot. And then you start in the desert. So, you're hitting 100-degree heat. You're running without total exposure, decent amount of sand, running through these beautiful, like, California foothills before you go up into the real deal, which is the high Sierras, high mountain passes, 14,000 feet. You're consistently staying between, 9 to 11,000 feet, and then you're getting all the way up to 13 or 14 every once in a while. You then drop down into Northern California and Oregon, which is like the most beautiful trail from a runner's perspective you could ask for. The elevation gets really nice in Oregon and Northern California, so you can kind of hit the ground running literally and pick up the pace of it. And then once you get to Washington, you hit some real mountains again, and real remote wilderness the entire time. So the longest, having a supply crew means they have to meet you at all these specific locations, figure all these logistics out. It's a logistical masterpiece, actually. And there's like 1 or 2 sections that are 100+ miles up to 200 miles without a road crossing. So it's a lot more wilderness than the East Coast.
Yeah. And
just to add a stat to that figure, I don't know how many Eiffel Towers, but I did just crunch the number real quick, and it is about 14 Mount Everest is the equivalent elevation.
Oh, cool.
There we go.
So there you go.
That's cool. Well, I want to get into a couple different things, but the first thing is, can you talk a little bit about Run for Colin and what that meant to you and how it propelled you, I think, during the last couple sections of the trail, at least from what we've talked about?
Yeah, so my cousin Colin passed away from neuroblastoma, which is a brain cancer, and I think it was about 9 or 10 days after being diagnosed that he passed away.
Oh my
so
goodness.
It was just like the most, it was just crazy. I remember I was on a service trip in New Orleans, and I got a call being like, hey, just wanted to let you know Colin's been hospitalized. And then for me, it was like less than a day later that he'd passed away. So it was just like, for our whole family, it was kind of like a giant shock.
Yeah.
And it was also, particularly, I guess, challenging because his dad and mom, they have a few health complications and they adopted. So having a kid that they kind of like welcomed into our family, and then, having him get taken away from us isn't easy.
Yeah.
They're champs, to say the least. And then I wanted to kind of honor Colin, and then honor also my cousin and Andrea, just because they needed a break, I guess.
Yeah.
I felt like and they lived in South Carolina, so I felt like it was a way where I could connect with them, even if, we didn't live right next to each other. And it was really cool because we got to do, I went down and visited them, a lot more than I typically did. We shot a really awesome documentary, and I heard there was a lot of really moving conversations that came out of it, which was, kind of one of the shocking things that you don't necessarily expect. It's funny when you get like a camera involved, sometimes people open up in ways that they never would otherwise, and you open up in ways you never would otherwise. And yeah, we did it, in honor of Colin, and definitely throughout the whole run, there were a lot of like weird circumstances and things that worked out, a logistical stop that worked out at the last minute. My family visiting all these different like little signs that felt like you're being walked over, or something was going on, which was pretty moving too.
That's beautiful, man. So during that, filming the doc and doing the fundraising and the actual run, like you mentioned, just needing to kind of express that through your spirit, right? It needing to be a part of you that was suppressed for a few years in Boston. But did you kind of have a perspective of, this is what I'm going to try and pursue for the rest of my life? Or was it going in just like, this is a project, and then Like, did you
See
think
how
you'd be
it
an
goes.
ultra runner for, after that?
Yeah. I did not. You can talk to Katie about that. That's my girlfriend. Katie, I told her, I was like, don't worry, Katie, this is probably the only time I'll ever do anything like this.
4 years later.
Yeah, right. Here so I planned, after I finished, I was like, hey, gloves are off. I accomplished a incredible accomplishment. It's something that I really wanted to do and felt like could have been like a capstone on a collegiate running career where I was like done what I wanted to do with running. Let's go do other things. Then I lived for a year in Austria, met a bunch of really cool people. At the end of the day, I got to ski a bunch. I played on like a semi-professional basketball team. I taught these really cool kids at this really unique technical school. I was like, there's all these things I could do. I took like 6 months off from running because my feet were numb and my muscles were beat up. And I was told like, just take a little time off, which I was more than happy to do so. And, come springtime, I started getting back into it. And the first few runs, I was like, I remember I did a few track workouts and I was like, oh my God, I'm the like post collegiate athlete life is real. I'm just slow. And then as I actually got back in better shape and started getting more into it, I started to still not consider myself an ultra runner, but the more you hear about ultra running, the more you kind of see it, the more you get drawn in. And I had a few close buddies who were knee deep, and that got me, in over the edge. And really, I think that's where, my racing interests lie. I don't really have that much interest other than for fun doing, some occasional miles and track or road races. I think ultras align most with my interests and goals.
Now, you mentioned there that you were more than happy to take a break, which I can imagine it makes a lot of sense after what you did. But a lot of people do struggle with giving themselves permission to take a break. If like running is something that you do every day, a lot of people can become addicted to running or addicted to working out. And then whether your body needs it or not, it's really hard to not move, right?
Jonathan, I think the daily grind is so much harder than like I know so many people you're always balancing that line of like, well, I don't have to run, but I want to run, and I will feel bad if I don't run, but then I also want to get a drink with someone. I feel like all the things in life that kind of pull you this way or that makes it so much harder to to play that line. When I was on the PCT, it was like run or bust. If I didn't, run every single day, then I would just fail. And then once I finished, that kind of relief, it was like a physical and mental and like spiritual release when I finished, where this like grasp on you that's saying like, only focus on running, screw your personal life, what you're thinking about, your career ambitions, like maybe your long-term health. Like your goal right now is to maximize how much distance you can gain every single second for every single day. And when I finished, it was like that pressure was just gone, which was it was a very, very good feeling, as opposed to the opposite like you're describing.
Well, so during those moments when you're you're fighting to push forward and you're telling yourself like, just focus on this, just keep going, like what do you have any mental strategies, and like just talk about what kind of grit you have in that moment?
I don't know. I think one of the things that people find frustrating with me is that I just kind of go with the flow and make it work.
Yeah, that's so frustrating. I've always thought that.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I mean, for like, there's so like the question I get that I'm like, I just wish I had a better answer for you is like, what's like the mental edge, or like what makes you be able to turn yourself into like a machine to be able to power through, the goal in front of you and just accomplish it? Like, what can I learn? And I wish I had like a better answer, but really what comes down to it is always keeping the, bigger picture in mind. And thinking of especially when you're doing a supported effort, like thinking of other people that are involved, who's been helping you, who got you to where you are. And even when I was doing the, AT, I was always thinking Katie put up with a lot of crap to make sure I could do the AT. There's multiple companies, friends, acquaintances, people who've sacrificed, who've gotten me there. So I always have like an underlying level of gratitude, which is like a weird way to answer your question. As far as like pushing yourself, every minute or every second. It's just like a switch, I guess, that I feel like I have and can keep on, and can keep on keeping on, where I know what the goal is. And once I have the goal in my mind, it's easy for me to make. It's kind of like making black and white decisions. It's like, if I sit here and take 10 extra minutes to eat lunch, is that going to help me run faster today? Nope. Easy answer. Keep going. My foot hurts. I need to patch it up, or should I keep going? Well, if I don't stop, I'm probably going to have a worse injury in my foot. It's going to only get worse. So I'll take 10, 15 minutes to look at it, see if I can fix it, and then keep running. I always have that kind of insight in mind of making, you're always balancing, of course, but when I know that goal, that light's that's at the end of the tunnel, I just kind of see it and go for it.
Very, very matter of fact, very much as you said, flow. It's like what, Forrest Gump. I just felt like running.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just need a cool t-shirt that I can get behind like he did.
Well, I like that there's a sense of gratitude there, because I think that, we obviously, we talk to pro athletes a lot, and I think one of the things that we maybe don't acknowledge enough or talk about just a little bit is that we're pretty privileged to be in this space at all, right? To be able to go out and do these types of things. So I think like having a sense of gratitude in those spaces, even if they seem really like singular and individual, is really important. I think that that's awesome that you try to have that as part of your foundation.
Yeah, and the thing that sucks the most about it is that sometimes it can seem like a load of BS of just be thankful for the people in your, like, sometimes I'll go to yoga classes and I'm like, okay, don't tell me to be just like breathe in gratefulness. Like, I can't do that. But, taking those extra seconds to try to like keep yourself in perspective, because like you said, it's a privilege to be in any position. If you're doing any kind of competitive sport or even recreational sport, that's always, some kind of privilege and something you should be thankful for and excited for and living up, because, whether it's, friends or family or even your own personal health, things can certainly change on a dime.
Yeah, absolutely. So you went to Austria, and that was about a year, and then you come back to Boston, and then do you fall in love with running again immediately right after that track workout, or like what?
No, he talks to you and he gets a job, right?
Well, that happened. Oh yeah, just to be clear, once again,
Jonathan's going to get me promoted. This is
it's all part of the resume
full
building.
Circle through Explorer Fire.
Oh my gosh!
Wow,
that was thunder.
Did you guys see that too?
Yeah.
It just hit me here.
We're in the same place, I guess.
That's
I forgot
right.
about that.
That'll be a cool audio section.
Yeah. So did you have to deal with any thunderstorms on the PCT or the AT that you're like scared for your life?
There were a few pretty common. I remember there was one of the ones that sucked on the PCT. I was going and I just went over this big pass, and like runnable terrain on something like that is like when you see a small negative change in elevation for 8, 10, 12 miles as opposed to 2 miles, and you can ride out a long downhill section, it's like music to my ears. Like, it's just the best thing to look at on a map ever. Like, it's so relieving, because that you can actually run. It's not going to be too steep to run, too technical to run. It's not going to be too much pounding on your legs. You can get a good pace and you can hold it, and you're kind of like maximizing the downhill elevation. You're not using it all at once. And I remember there was one section, I wish I remember. It was in Oregon, but it just dumped. I know I was going over this like mountain that was mostly exposed, and I just was jumping from tree to tree. It would like dump on me, and then it would clear up and be like, oh, it's fine. And then I'd run, and then I'd hear thunder crack, and then I'd be like, oh my God. So I'd run under a tree, and then it would dump again. And finally I was just like, okay, I just have to run through this, obviously. And I went down this like 10, 12 mile stretch. And for a few miles, I was like feeling good, running in the rain. I'm like, you have the whole like rebirth thing coming in through like crazy, like thunder and rain and all this stuff. And you're feeling cool. And then all of a sudden, like the overgrowth in Oregon just starts taking over the trail. And through some of these sections, I have to literally like turn sideways, push my leg through 100 meters of just absolutely soaked brush. And it's all like big wide leaves. So I'm just getting like, not only am I wet and like you have a certain level of like saturation that your body stays at when you're really wet, and you can't get too, it's like the difference between like once you jump in a puddle and then start running in the rain, like you're going to be less wet a little bit after you've left the puddle. But it was like going into that puddle every like 2 minutes. And by the end of this 12-mile section, which I thought was going to be some of my favorite running on the PCT, and I was also running through this like kick-ass river that just is like awesome single track. And for the last 3 miles, my ankle started to hurt, like the top of my foot, the tendon there started to hurt. And then it started to hurt a lot. And then I had to walk a little bit, and then I had to run walk. And my shoe was just like, it squished every time I stepped on it. And by the time I got done, I had done like not permanent damage, but I had done long-term damage to my like tendon sheath of the retinaculum on the top of your foot. And for the next 2 weeks, I had to hobble.
Oh my gosh. So this turned into a long, I was like, whoa, this really is probably the worst thunderstorm of your life.
Yeah, that was a good question.
Yeah. Okay, so you get back to the area, and then when do you decide, you know what, PCT wasn't like, that was cool, but I'm actually going to go after the Appalachian Trail fastest known time as well?
Good question.
When you're going into it, here, let's start with this. Are you going into it looking for the FKT?
I certainly went into the AT looking for the FKT.
That's fastest known time for people who don't know that abbreviation. I just said it, but it took me a while to figure out what that was. So.
Yeah, Emily, well done. And there are also supported and self-supported FKTs, which the PCT trip was supported, and self-supported means you're kind of out there in like a thru hiker experiencing the trail without outside support, which is actually a good segue, because that's exactly, I told myself if I was ever going to do a trail again, it was going to be the Appalachian Trail, and I was going to do it self-supported. And that was it felt like a huge if at the time. And then I kept thinking about that and was like, well, maybe I could do that. Maybe it is. So essentially I averaged about 50 miles on the PCT. And then on the AT, I was like, if I was going to break the supported record, self-supported, it would be about 50 miles. And there are actually a few reasons why I think carrying all your own stuff sometimes is actually a benefit. But I was kind of always had this idea in the back of my mind, and I sort of slowly researched gear, and I stayed, in good shape through ultras, and I guess became more knowledgeable and stronger in ultras. And it was actually, it's funny because, so Emily and I used to work at EF, Education First. I guess I still work there. And it wasn't until my manager was like, sat me in a room and was like, Joe, like, what do you want from what do you want in your career? Like, what are you interested in? Where do you want to go? How can I make sure you're happy? And then I was like, well, I guess I could want to get a promotion or move into like a different role or product or something. But I really want to just run the Appalachian Trail.
I like that transparency.
Yeah, right. And she was Swedish, and so she has no idea what the piece. She was like, every time I talked to her about the PCT, she's like, "Oh, Joe, you're crazy. You did this crazy thing." That's about her understanding of it. And then she was like, "Oh, I'm sure we can make it work. You run this trail and be happy, or like we'll figure it out." And little did she know what she was getting into. But that gave me kind of like the first real like tangible step that felt like, wait a second, this is. And it's a little bit different when you don't have a job and you're just leaving college, and you can treat it as like a life-changing, transformative, formative experience, right, versus, taking like a job break, an occupational break to go, after something like this. Yeah,
that's definitely two different things as far as society seeing it. A gap year is like pretty understandable, but like just leaving your job for a month or more to go to the wilderness, questionable.
Questionable.
Yeah.
So the Appalachian Trail, probably more people at least around here, Boston, would have heard of that, but that is 2,186 miles. And when did you do this? This was in August, right?
Yeah, last summer. So I finished, I think it was the last or second to last day of August.
And you did it in 45 days, 12 hours and 15 minutes?
On the nose.
On the nose.
It's almost like we researched it.
Yeah, you guys are really, really good with numbers and things.
Well, so, I mean, as far as like your story goes, dude, we gotta know the numbers. The numbers are
true.
everything
That's
here.
what the story is. Yeah. Otherwise, people don't care that much.
But that's just outrageously impressive, being that that was 9 days faster than the previous unsupported record.
Yeah, it was 9 days faster than the previous supported record, and my goal going into it was actually to beat the supported record, which I did by about, 10 hours, I think. Which that was kind of from the get-go. That was what I had my eyes on. I knew I had self-supported record could, assuming you stayed healthy and you were able to, keep knocking out miles, it was doable. Doing that self-supported, trying to go after the supported record, was really what fueled me and pushed me, especially compared to the last run where I felt like I was doing it more for, my family and, I guess, kind of having that totally different picture. It was a very different experience, and through the like overall record, it's really what pushed me to keep going for, for 48 miles a day and doing it just supported yourself. It's a different kind of grind.
So what does that look like, doing that kind of mileage and doing it, carrying all your own stuff? Like what do you have in the pack, and what are you eating? Like how do you be that efficient? Yeah,
so that's the whole question, is how you go about it, because there's so many factors to consider. It's anywhere from, I think my weight was anywhere from 8 to 24 pounds that I was carrying at any one point in time, varying pretty much on food. So anywhere from, I guess that would leave food and water to be up to around 15 pounds, carrying food for anywhere from 2 to 5 days, depending on where your resupply was. I had to have food mailed or mail myself food, and resupplies. That includes shoes, shorts, all these other things I had to have mailed to random towns in rural, eastern seaboard, which was kind of fun in itself to kind of go through in all these like small towns and see a different part of the U.S. And you're also running, an average, I think I average about 48 miles a day, meaning I was averaging 3 to 4 miles an hour, more around the 3.5 to 3 miles an hour, anywhere from 12 to 16, active hours, meaning I was moving, not counting breaks, on the trail.
Oh my gosh. Speechless.
Is that something you want to do, Emily?
No, I have no desire to do that one. No. So like when you get to kind of similar, I mean, on the PCT, you said there's two sections where it's like 100 miles plus without any roads, but on the Appalachian Trail, there is the 100-mile wilderness right before you get to kind of the final stretch, right?
Yeah.
So how is that going through that? Because what my impression or what I've read about that section is that people go a little crazy there, and they get a little like stir crazy and like nervous.
Yeah, it's definitely the biggest, like, it has the most mystique. I don't know if that's the right word, but surrounding it, where people like freak out. Every thru hiker is always like in the back of their mind, like, what's really going to happen when I hit the 100-mile wilderness? And I honestly, it's funny because that was like, I think that was some of my best running that I did on the whole trail. I'd just come off
because you wanted to get through it so quickly.
Well,
yeah, cause I was like, screw beauty and wilderness and all these, screw roses. I can smell them when I'm dead. I'll just no, so I ended up running the 100-mile wilderness and then finishing in something like 30, I don't know exactly how many hours, but about 2 days. I did like a final push of around, I think 100 and I did, let me think if I can do the math right. I did like 36 hours straight. And if I remember right, it was 117 miles. So I ran through the night to finish. And most of that was on the 100-mile wilderness. So I did about 5 miles into the 100-mile wilderness, camped at this. Well, actually, before I camped, I wanted to do a few more miles because I knew I was going to have one more push in me. And then I tripped on this nasty route at like 10 p.m. landed on my hip and got really pissed off, and then hiked about a half mile and then went to bed.
I can't picture you pissed off, but yeah.
Yeah, I was pretty upset. I was just bummed.
So describe your feeling of getting to the top of Katahdin there.
Which is the end of the Appalachian Trail. I'll just keep
I'll just keep saying things and you just keep
for the listeners.
Defining.
You're the color commentator.
Fact checker.
Yeah.
So I had this big run. I knew if I was going to have to beat it, I'd have to. There have been a few Appalachian Trail mishaps at Katahdin with past runners. So I didn't want to be like that guy who ruined it for everybody, because Katahdin, there's always tension between the AT and Baxter State Park, where a past runner like spilled champagne on the top of Katahdin after breaking the runner and had an extra large group. And then there was this huge like shitstorm on the internet. There was a lot of trolling going on. It was mildly entertaining, but also a little scary, hoping Baxter wouldn't pull out as the finish of the AT. So I didn't want to like somehow reignite that fire. So I knew I had to finish early enough. If I had to finish early enough, that meant I had to get to Katahdin early enough in the day. They actually cut off, hikers finishing up Katahdin, and going to the finish, meaning if I like had arrived late enough, like according to the protocol, they wouldn't have let me go up to the top. The whole way there, I was also running out of food, which was kind of funny. So
yeah, so fun.
Hilarious.
Yeah. I was like, okay, I have 117 miles. I have like one go for it. I need to be really strategic in the food I eat. And the biggest issue is going to be like staying up overnight. So I also, the mountains in the 100-mile wilderness, about 70 miles before the AT finishes, they finish off. So I knew if I got to that section, if I got over those mountains and did a little over 40 miles before like sundown, which was around like 7:30 at that point, then I'd have mostly all flat terrain that I could just cruise through in the night. Assuming I ate right, I didn't fall into any issues, and I actually had enough food to like fuel my body. And my body didn't break down, I'd be able to finish. Although at this point I'd had a few nasty injuries that I was a little scared about. So I'd been popping a lot of Advil, which wasn't great, but it got me through. And I made it over it was like 74 to go. I made it over the mountain just as it started getting dark. And then I just cruised throughout. I honestly was a little scaredy cat when it comes to night running, because you'll have experiences where you fall. You go about a mile an hour slower when it's dark. So it just feels like crap, because you're like, oh, well, I'm doing this normal pace and I added an extra 2 hours onto my day. And I went 5 miles, and you'll double check the mileage because it doesn't seem right. I managed to do about a little under 3 miles an hour through the night, granted on all flat terrain. And every hour I was really diligent about eating between 150 to 300 calories of the food that I had remaining. And I just trucked through the entire night, and it felt so good when the sunrise came. There was a super beautiful sunrise over some lake in Maine that I can't pronounce. It was all these yellows and oranges and things. It was spectacular. Right at that time, I also ate a hot pepperoni stick. I thought it was salami, so I gagged a little bit and started crying to myself, and my throat burned for a while. And I could go on for stories. You guys wanted me for years, but then about 28 miles out, I bonked a little bit. Bonking is basically where your body doesn't have the right nutrients, usually revolving around sugar or carbohydrates. And I had to take a good 15 minutes where I just sat down and was kind of my head felt like it was spinning, and I just kind of felt sick. And I was like, I have 28 miles to go. I have about 600 calories, mostly all nuts. How am I going to make it 28 miles? And you're just doing this super slow math in your head. It's like when you wake up and you just can't process anything. That was how I felt. I was like, how am I going to make it 28 miles? And I just kind of sat there for 15 minutes. And then eventually all you could do, right? Like I was telling you earlier, it's a black and white choice of I can either run or I'd don't run right now. So I run. And I was really holding out for that food was really, really tough. There was also a small shop about 10 miles out that I'd forgotten about from the finish, maybe 12 at Aples Bridge. So I just like housed some Pringles and some chips and other things that fueled me for the last 12 miles. And going up to Katahdin, I was kind of emotional because I'd gone through so much that day. And I could feel like the bottoms of my feet just hurt. The Advil wasn't something I'd really felt before, but they were just been used and swollen for so long. They just really started to hurt and be uncomfortable. My muscles just were achy, but I was like, this is what I'm working with. And I'm going up Katahdin, and my mom's going to be there, and Katie's going to be there, and my best friend Josh is going to be there. And it's a serious mountain. Like, if you haven't been to Katahdin, it's like most mountains on the AT, you can like walk up and over, and you're like, oh, I guess that wasn't technically a mountain. Katahdin is like nasty.
It's a mountain. Did you go to Knife Edge?
I didn't go Knife Edge. No, I went up to Tabletop through, I forget what the ascent is, but
Cathedral.
Yeah, I think so. And as I'm going up just below the tree line, first off, I got the whole Baxter permitting thing squared away, which I was stellar about, because they're like, well, we probably shouldn't let you go up, but you're a thru hiker. I didn't explain my whole backstory, but I was like, we'll let you go up. I was like, okay, thank you. I'm glad my whole 45 days that I just did weren't for naught, because at this point I was about 10 hours ahead of the other guy, Carl Meltzer, who had set the record. And if I hadn't gone up that night, then I would have been too late to go up in the next day and beat him. So I would have lost out on the overall record. I go up, I'm like thinking all these crazy thoughts, thinking about being grateful and all these people. My mom comes down because she's like, oh, it's really miserable at the top. Once you get above tree line, it's super windy. It's all these boulders. You just can't do it. And I'm like, Mom, come on. Like, I won't say your age. I know you're maybe a little too old to be climbing up mountains, but like, you can do it. And she was like, no, I'm just going to go down. I'm happy with that. And so then I get like sad because my mom's not there. And then as I'm about to get out of tree line, I feel like a sting on my hamstring.
Oh,
and I turn back and sweat, and there's literally like a wasp still stuck in my hamstring.
Oh,
and then another one stings me right in the butt. And
sorry, it's not funny.
No, it really wasn't funny. It's funny, but it was not funny. I was so pissed. And I'm just like, okay, no like sentimental BS. I'm getting to the top of this thing and I'm finishing it, and like, screw you, Woods. And sure enough, like, my mom wasn't lying. Like, the everything above tree lines like was miserable. It was like 60-mile-an-hour winds. It rained when I got up there, super misty, so you couldn't see everything. It started hailing for the last like 10 minutes. Katie and Josh and another like a Boston Globe reporter had been waiting there for 2 hours in like high 30 degrees temperatures, waiting for, like, just sitting around waiting for me to get to the finish. And like, Katahdin's really deceiving. It's a lot of like exposed sections.
Yeah.
So I thought I was done, and I'd read the elevation wrong. So I kept thinking like, I'm here. And it took me a good 30 minutes after thinking I was hopefully finished to actually get to the top. And then we were also cold, and Katie was shivering so bad. And my friend Josh was like, immediately like clothed me, because I had lost my one like kind of faux rain jacket, like light-ish rain jacket. And I started shivering, but then I realized that like Katie was half dead and Josh was just like spent. So I took like a minute of crying hysterically to myself, and then we were like, okay, that checks that box off. Let's get down.
So just crying is the emotion, a very overwhelming emotion. Mostly anger is what I heard from that story. You're like, it
was for a bit. Once I got above tree line, everything got much more into perspective, and you get this really weird feeling of, it's sort of like how I described the PCT, where you just feel this like ultimate release of like it worked. Like, I got to the finish in one piece. I have all these amazing people surrounding me who I can share this moment with. I can think of all the ridiculous things I've done to get to where I am here. And it's totally worth it. But at the same time, you can't process that. Yeah. So I just sat there for a little bit, kind of like not really thinking about anything, just trying to take it all in. And then that's when I started crying for like a minute, and then called that good. After seeing everybody like looking at me It was funny. It was crazy.
You're so descriptive with the story. I feel like I was like right there along with you. It's very, very
you should
cool.
write a little book about that.
All I can think about too is like hearing you describe lakes in Maine or woods and mountains in Oregon or whatever. Like you're like recalling terrain around the country as if you know it. Like, you know, most people know driving 95, right?
Yeah.
Like you have such an intimate relationship with the land coast on either coast, and that is a very cool thing because most people don't experience that.
Yeah, and that's also funny you said that, because no matter who you are, anybody who goes and runs a trail like this, you'll always have heard multiple people who enjoy using the internet for its anonymity, and I don't know if that's the right way to say it either, but
I'll fact check that afterwards.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot of like, cool, but did he stop and smell the roses talk? Which going at that pace and doing something like that, it's such an incredibly like life-changing experience, no matter how you're doing it, walking or hiking or crawling or rolling. I don't know if anyone's rolled it yet, but it is really cool to think about. There's so many places out there that, I was able to see in such a short period of time that I think, you will always take with you.
So for anybody thinking about possibly, even considering the PCT or the AT, whether they're going to walk it or go after your record, like what would you say to somebody trying to get started in even considering, I'm going to go for a 2,000 mile jog today?
I don't know, man. The people who have finished, people that have run the trail come from all different backgrounds. There's a great book by Jennifer Farr Davis that just came out. She actually she originally set the record as like the woman's FKT. And then when she got done, she felt like really hollow. And she was like, part of the reason I did this is to like prove how strong like females in ultra competitive, like record breaking pursuits can be. And I like limited myself by just going after the female, like I didn't even consider doing the overall FKT. And then she went back the next year and broke the overall FKT, so she beat the fastest guy. And she did it totally her own way. Everybody who set the record on something like this, she does an amazing job like outlining 8 different people who've set records on the Appalachian Trail. They're like, or are involved in FKTs or setting records like that. And it's amazing the kind of background that people come from, whether that's professional ultra runners, whether that's, through hiking enthusiasts, whether that's, people who hold down part-time jobs and then spend every single summer, hiking, or whether it's kind of like their one athletic accomplishment of their life and then they checked it off and never go back into anything like that again. And to answer your question, because that was not necessarily an answer to your question, I'd say recommendations I'd give to people would be, I guess for record breaking, is just being aware of what's come before you, and respecting that culture and groundwork that's already been set, and then just going and trying to surprise yourself, because ultimately it's such a niche sport and activity that I don't think we've really realized who the best 2,189 mile runners are at this point in human civilization.
No, it's probably not that many.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? Are you considering the Continental Divide, trying to go after the Triple Crown there?
I honestly think I'd love to Triple Crown, and I probably will. But I guess I don't know if I probably will. I'd like to. He will
do it. That's cute that he says he doesn't know if he'll do
it. No, doing it for a record isn't something that interests me as much. I'd say I'm more interested in the PCT or Appalachian Trail. There's all these nuances with FKTs and running a trail for a record, and they lend themselves pretty well to the PCT and to the Appalachian Trail. The CDT is still kind of untamed. No one's really done it before. There's multiple routes, and it's like a much newer trail, and still, I think, finding its own thing. I kind of like to keep it where it is right now.
So you just did something though in was it Iceland? What was
Ireland.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I ran the Wicklow Round, which is essentially it's a 26 peak challenge, you could call it. It's similar to the Bob Graham Round or the John Ramsey Round in the UK. So the history of fastest known times in the US originates from like long distance trails. So it originates from the John Muir Trail, from the PCT, from the Appalachian Trail, the Colorado Trail. Those are some standard kind of big name FKTs in the US. In Europe, things developed a little bit differently. They developed and created rounds, which essentially are 24-hour challenges for trail records. So rather than, there's not the similar kind of like long distance trail cult or cultures in Europe as there's the same way there is in the US outside of maybe like Camino de Santiago, but even that's a lot different. So the Wicklow Round is 26 peaks. Your goal is actually to find the most efficient round between these different peaks, hitting them in order in any way you'd like, whether that's a trail, whether that's going through backcountry, which in Ireland means, bogs, marshes, tufts of grass, cliffs, running through ferns. There's, a lot of different types of terrain. And then doing that as fast as you can. There's trails and roads that you can obviously connect some between, but a part of it, as much of it is like a physical challenge, part of it's also a navigational challenge and a like efficiency challenge where you've hopefully figured out or scouted like the fastest connecting points between two mountains, so that come, race day, you can get out there, and once you hit one peak, you know exactly which route you're going to take to the next one. But of course, there's always arguments for what's the fastest way or the most efficient way, least tiring way, most direct way that you can always, debate people on.
That's fun. It's like make your own adventure. I like it.
Yeah, when I first looked at it, I was like, oh, the fastest time is like 17 hours and it's about 100 kilometers or like just over 60 miles. That like doesn't add up. For the elevation gain, that doesn't add up at all. And then when I looked at my overall mileage when I finished, I was like, oh, that's because like your actual mileage is like 75 miles because of all like the detours, because the way they mile it is just like peak to peak to peak to peak, which of course is never the most efficient way to go if you're just drawing straight lines.
Right.
Oh man, I think you have a long career ahead of you, Joe. I'm excited. I'm excited for you.
Assuming you take care of the legs and the feet, man. I saw that Instagram picture of after you did finish the AT and your feet were balloons. It was insane.
That was nice.
Yeah.
How long did they stay like that?
I forget what the technical term is. Do either of you guys know like the technical term for like when you're
balloon feet?
Yeah, we just said it.
Balloon feet, the technical term. No, there's some like nurse term from when, because one of my roommates is a nurse, for when you're like there's literally just like sitting fluid in your
Gout?
No, not gout. Like that would have been
Like...
that would have been pretty extreme.
Yeah.
But essentially I could like press into my ankle and it would leave like an imprint of maybe like 2 or 3, 4 millimeters.
So you had Tempur-Pedic legs.
Exactly. Yeah. Perfect.
I think that's the technical term.
Yeah, I think Tempur-Pedic legs. I can get behind that. So that was a good like 2 weeks. My roommates called me Santa Joe because I'd eat like 4,000 calories for dinner. I'd like make 4 different meals for dinner, and then I'd just eat. And I was pretty gaunt after I finished, aside from my Tempur-Pedic legs. And I would eat so much food that my like stomach would like literally bulge out, and it looked like one of those like hunger victims whose stomach just like ballooned because had just eaten so much food, and the rest of my body was a little frail.
Oh my gosh. All right, well...
Sounds like a really good sport to get into.
Yeah, everyone listening, definitely start trail running, do some ultras. You can get some balloon feet, as Jonathan calls them, and but you also maybe get stung in the butt by a bee, and maybe fall and hurt your hip. So everything's coming up roses.
But you might get a job. So
that's good. Yeah.
Right.
So
so congratulations. You are now a sponsored ultra trail runner, right? So
thank you. Yeah, with Columbia.
That's great.
Yeah.
So last question, Joe, and we try to ask all of our guests this, but how do you define Stoke?
Stoke. Stoke is a great word. How do you define Stoke?
Yeah. What does it mean to you? And what are you most stoked about right now?
What am I? I'll use it in a sentence. I am super stoked to be running. I'm doing this race in Italy in like a month. It's the Mount Etna 50K. There was a 100K option, but I was like, I can be a wuss everyone. I'll just do the 50K. I have other races this summer, so I decided to do it. But it's like 9,000 feet of elevation gain in a 50K race, which is it's super. You basically run straight up Mount Etna, which is like a real mountain, and then you come right back down. So I'm super stoked for Mount Etna. I also might be the only American running it, which will be common because my Italian because my Italian is pretty non-existent.
Yeah. I was like, I don't remember that on your resume.
No, it might have been there. Just snuck it in there and hope you didn't notice.
Fluent in Italian.
Yeah, exactly.
but never questioned about it.
Yeah.
I'd say stoked is like a supreme level of excitement for something.
Yeah.
Supreme being the key word there.
Yeah, above all else. I like it.
That works.
So, Joe, people can follow you on Instagram, right? It's thestring.bean. Is that the best place to follow you for your adventures?
Thestring.bean. That was my trail name. We didn't even talk about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, so what are you, 6'4" and like a bean pole? So I assume that's why that came from Stringbean.
Pretty straightforward. We didn't need to talk about it. You're right. We can move on.
There it is.
Okay, I already did it.
Well, for anybody listening, we can wrap up by talking about what is a trail name.
Oh, good question. This is actually kind of fun because people get big kicks out of this. A trail name is a name you are given or give yourself when doing a long distance thru hike. Some people say it's like you're changing your personality or persona when you get out there, which rubs them the wrong way, which is also kind of crap. But it's a kind of a fun name to have when you're out meeting all these new people. A few that come to mind immediately was there was a guy named Speed Bump in 2014 who passed out after about, I want to say like 50 miles of hiking in the desert right after the kickoff, which we had about like 500 hikers hiking right over this guy who was passed out on the side of the trail, which then dubbed him Speed Bump.
Did he keep going? That's amazing.
I don't know what happened. Probably not.
All right, so don't be Speed Bump.
Don't be Speed Bump. And then for fun, there was also a girl named Rocket Llama, which is probably one of my all-time favorite names.
That
and
is
then
an awesome name.
Another guy named Ice Axe who carried an ice axe for around like 600 or 700 miles to get to the high Sierras in California. And then there wasn't even snow. So he basically carried an ice axe in his pack for a few months only to throw it away.
Oh my gosh, what a waste.
So were you dubbed the Stringbean or was that self-proclaimed?
More so, I guess technically my mom can get original rights if she wants.
So we'll trademark her. We'll put her in.
Trademark.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks so much, Joe. It's been great chatting with you and catching up. Thank God that I hired you those years ago, and otherwise we wouldn't know each other.
Seriously.
You might know of Joe. You might.
That's true. I would be just following him and not being like, hey, I know that guy.
Yeah.
This would not be nearly as fun.
Yeah.
And I'd probably be even harder to get a hold of.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Awesome. Yeah, man, it was really great hearing your story. I really enjoyed the picture you painted. Took us along for a journey here, many journeys. Really impressive, dude. And again, follow Joe at the Stringbean, and that is the string.bean on Instagram. That's where he hangs out, and that's where he wants to hang with you.
Perfect. Hey, thank you guys. It's been comical, I guess, to say the least.
Thanks for sharing a thunderstorm in Boston with us.
Yeah.
Of course, anytime.
Thank you so much for spending time with us and Joe McConaughy. It was a great conversation. We obviously giggled a lot. There's lots of giggles in that one, but
it was a good
nice giggles. Yeah. I loved hearing about his bee sting and the last slog up to Katahdin, and I felt, like you said, I felt like I was there.
Right there.
Yeah, I think he should write a multitude of books about the whole experience.
Joe, you listening right now? Write a book, man.
He's on a trail right now. He's definitely not listening.
No, that was really good chat and amazing stories. Really, man, I can't that's brutal what you have to go through to do that, but really, really inspiring. And so thanks for joining us for the thunderstorm session of the Stokecast.
Absolutely.
And be sure to check out exploreinspired.com/Stokecast for all the show notes here. And as always, subscribe. If you're liking what you're hearing, leave a review on iTunes. It helps us out a lot, and we love to hear what you think, so we can continue making this better and also just hear what you're taking away.
So stay tuned for some more awesome episodes with rad people, but stay stoked. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Emily Holland.
And I'm Jonathan Ronzio. We'll catch you next week with another episode of the Stokecast.